The nights are long, the days are short, and the weather is chilly to downright cold, depending on where you are. It's a good time to slip into a Quince iconic Mongolian cashmere sweaters, which start at only $50. You can treat yourself to everyday luxury at an affordable price with Quince. If you really want to dive into luxury, you can check out their leather handbags, washable silk shirts, and European linen sheet sets. Whatever you're looking for at Quince, all the prices are 50 to 80% less than similar brands, and they do that by partnering directly with top factories and cutting out the middleman. They only work with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing processes. And of course, they use premium fabrics and finishes for that luxury feel in every piece. But you've already heard me rave about my Quince travel pants. Treat yourself this winter without the luxury price tag. Go to quince.com/traveler for 365-day returns plus free shipping on your order. That's QUINCE.com/traveler to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/traveler. And thanks to Quince for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler.
What is... Dax, are you?
Tracking all our cars on Carvana Value Tracker on all our devices? Yes, Kristen, yes I am.
Well, I've been looking for my phone for...
In Dax's domain, we see all. So we always know what our cars are worth.
All of them?
All of them. Value surge, trucks up 3.9%.
That's a great offer.
I know. Sell?
Sell.
Track your car's value with Carvana Value Tracker today.
Amateur Traveler, episode 927. Today, Amateur Traveler talks about a dam, a waterfall, and football, a palace and a strawberry festival, the ruins of Jesuit missions, and all-you-can-eat restaurants for meat eaters as we go to the country of Paraguay. This is Chris Christensen from Amateur Traveler. Let's talk about Paraguay. I'd like to welcome to the show Alex from adventuretoeverycountry.com, and Alex has come to talk to us about Paraguay. Alex, welcome to the show.
Hi, Chris. Thank you for having me on here. I'm in Paraguay for the third time now. This is a country that I first visited 2 years ago, and then I came back a few months back, and now I'm here for the third time. It's a country where I met my girlfriend, who is Paraguayan, so that's my main link to the country, really.
Excellent. That answers my first question of what's your connection to Paraguay. Why should someone come to Paraguay?
So Paraguay is more about the culture than anything else. It's not a country that you come to for bucket list tourist attractions. That's something where you might go to neighboring Brazil for Rio or Iguazu Falls on the border with Argentina. You've got Uyuni salt flats in Bolivia. So Paraguay is much more low-key. It's more about authentic culture, getting to know the locals, getting off the tourist trail. If you travel through some of these other countries I just mentioned, then there's a well-defined gringo trail, they call it, where you'll run into lots of Germans, Americans, Brits, French, Dutch, and so on. But when you do meet locals, it's more of a tourist bubble. You don't really get that authentic experience. Everyone speaks relatively good English, are used to working in tourism. That's not the case in Paraguay. In Paraguay, it's quite rare to find people who speak fluent English here. The tourism industry, it's not such a big thing. I think Paraguay's main source of income is agriculture, if I remember correctly. You come here to meet the locals, to get off the tourist path, and to enjoy the food. The food here is absolutely fantastic. So, yeah, that's why you come to Paraguay, food and culture.
Excellent. What itinerary are you going to recommend for us?
I would say start in Asunción, the capital. It's the main artery into the country. Even then, it's not particularly well connected, so you'll most likely be coming from Sao Paulo, Buenos Aires, Bogota, then the main routes in really, or Madrid if you're coming direct from Europe. It's the only direct route in from Europe. But yeah, Asunción is quite a laid-back city, but there's still quite a lot to see here. So you can start with the President's Palace, Palacio de los López. You can go there. It's a big colonial-style building. The president works there, so you've got armed guards patrolling the outside. You can't get in whilst he's there, of course. But I did see him come into work a couple of years ago, which is quite interesting. It's quite a low-key event. He does have an armed group of guards around him, but it's not something like in a bigger country where he's completely off limits. If you were standing outside the White House, for example, and you saw Joe Biden come into work, then I'm sure you wouldn't be able to get anywhere near him, and there'd be really strong security.
Well, I was wrestling with the name because it's Palace of the Lopez, and my Paraguayan history is not great, so I didn't realize that's the name of the first president of Paraguay.
Okay, yeah.
Carlos Antonio Lopez. So it's, oh, okay. Now I get it.
Okay, yeah, I've just learned something myself there, so thanks for that one, Chris. Yeah, I didn't know that before, but the palace is quite a nice place to start. Just around the corner, you've got the Pantheon of Heroes, which is a mausoleum, and you can see where a lot of Paraguay's past heroes are buried down there. You've got a couple of guards at the entrance. They're armed with bayonets, but generally they're just there for ceremonial purposes, although I'm sure they will spring into action if there is a security issue. But they generally just stand and walk around. But the mausoleum is quite an interesting thing to see, and it's also a point of national pride for Paraguayan people, because every time people come from diplomats from different countries, they will be taken by a Paraguayan official to the Pantheon of Heroes, and they'll often leave a tribute there. So I've seen big floral tributes left by diplomats from Germany, India, and Chile during my visits there in the past. That's a cool spot in one of the plazas there. You also have the Independence House, Casa de la Independencia. This is where the locals planned to get Paraguay back from the Spanish Empire and make it an independent country. And they had relative success doing this. That they said to the Spanish, "We want to be independent." And the Spanish, to be fair, they let Paraguay have their independence without any real violence, which isn't what we see in every country that has an independence movement. So, yeah, it was relatively peaceful, but the House of Independence today, it's a free museum. You can walk in there, you can look around, you can see what life was like over 100 years ago. It's a bit of a time capsule, really. So that's a good place to spend about 20 or 30 minutes. And then another 5 minutes or so away from there, you have Centro Cultural Manzana de la Rivera, which is the cultural centre. Now, I would say you should try and find a guide who speaks English here, because otherwise you might not understand what's going on. It is free to enter, but like a lot of things in Paraguay, it caters to a Spanish-speaking audience. Okay. So you've got cultural icons like the Paraguayan harp is something that they're very proud of. It's a very big instrument, and they like to play it here in traditional Paraguayan music. So you can see that, and you can walk around the center. And then just around the corner from there, you have the Costanera, which is the coast. It's the Paraguay River. So Paraguay is a landlocked country. It's not by the ocean or the sea. Where we talk about the coast in Paraguay, we're always talking about a river or a lake. But still, I think Costanera is a nice place to go for a walk. You can see the president's palace from there, and there's a big sign that says Asunción. So if you want to get your tourist pictures, then that's the place to do it.
Okay, that's my selfie shot. Okay.
Yeah. These are the main cultural attractions and tourist attractions in Asunción. But beyond that, there are quite a few other interesting things. One of my favorites is the all-you-can-eat steakhouses. And you have several of them in Asunción and a handful elsewhere as well. but they're really good places. Some of the best steak in the world. I'm not exaggerating when I say that Asunción has my favorite restaurant in the world, and the bar was pretty high after I spent about 3 months now in Argentina in total. But Argentina has amazing steak and it's very famous for its steak. Paraguay, not so much, but it should be. These
Well,
places, yep,
don't hold back on us here. You were saying your favorite restaurant in the world, which is
it's called Paulista Grill. So
okay.
it's actually a Brazilian restaurant because Paulista means person from Sao Paulo, but
Okay.
it's in Paraguay. And how it works is you go inside and you'll sit at the table, and then you'll have various waiters walking around offering you different cuts of meat. They might offer you vacío, beef de chorizo, ribs, or sometimes they also come with sausages or chicken, so it's not just beef. But that's the highlight of the steakhouses. Although, even if you're not into steak, there is a lot on offer for even vegetarians as well. So you have a big buffet there, which has chips, fries, mandioca, which is a local Paraguayan vegetable, pastas, salads, sushi. So there's a lot of options there, even if you're not into meat.
Now, when I go to a local Brazilian steakhouse here in my city, it's usually a fixed price, all you can eat. Is that what we're talking about here in Paraguay?
Yeah, yeah. So everything is included, all the steak, anything on the buffet, anything on the desserts. The exceptions are drinks, which are not included.
Okay.
And in many of these, including Paulista, you have to pay extra for ice cream. But there is still a very generous dessert buffet with lots of cakes. And if you fancy something a little bit healthier, they've got fruit salads as well and a handful of fruits too. So, yeah, there is something for everyone in these places.
So I can eat my fill of steak and then consider it healthy if I eat fruit for dessert, right?
Yeah, that's one way to try and justify it.
Now, if I go to Fugo de Chao here in San Jose, California, that's going to be like $71. So a
Wow.
little less in Paraguay.
Just a bit, yeah. So the cheapest of these places, Sol Brazil is just about the cheapest, or Brasa and Lenya, they have a deal on to if you have two people. It's about £10 for all you can eat. So in US dollars,
Wait,
that's
10
about
pounds for 2?
12 per person.
Oh, per person. Okay.
So so
But
yeah,
still,
those are the cheapest ones, but even the more expensive ones still only around £17, so $21, which compared to what you just said in California, that's still very
right.
cheap. That's the upmarket option by Paraguayan standards. So
Okay.
literally a quarter or less than that, a fifth of what you pay in California.
Hmm. Interesting. Cool. Did you have any other ones that you wanted to mention? You mentioned your favorite, so I don't know if we need to talk about anything else other than the best restaurant in the world. But
Paulista is our favorite. Both of us, my girlfriend included, we love it there and we go most weeks. But equally, you've got Aquarella, which is one of the more, I say, expensive ones. Expensive compared to Paraguay standards, very cheap
Mhm.
compared to American standards. But again, just like Paulista, it's a good all-round package. So the service is good, the meat is very good, the buffet is very big. There's a very generous dessert selection. I would say, along with Paulista, Aquarella is in the top two. You also have a couple of others, Rodizio and Sol Brazil. Now, they don't have the same selection as the others, but they
Okay.
are still very good. If you want to go for a cheaper option, then they do still have good quality meat, good service. Brasa and Lenya, again, that's more of a budget one, which does have a good selection of meat. You should go there with someone else because they have a 2-for-1 deal. So it's two people for 160,000 guaranis, so about £16 or £8 each, so $10 each. So that I would say is one of the better budget options. Although Paulista does do promo Sunday evenings, it changes monthly, but at the moment it's about £9, so $11 per person. Again, that makes it very cheap there.
Sure.
The other one of these restaurants, which probably has the best reputation, although I wouldn't necessarily agree with that these days, is O Gaucho. Now, I first went there a couple of years ago and it was amazing. They had a traffic light system where you show a green card and people will come over to your table, offer you meat, or red if you don't want them to come over. But for some reason, they've scrapped that system now, and it's a bit more chaotic, and you'll get offered meat every 30 seconds to a minute, and it just gets a little bit... You can't really enjoy your meal in peace so much these days. So I would say a Gaucho, fantastic food, lots of options to choose from, very generous desserts, and unlike others, the ice creams are included there. But I'd also say the service is not quite as good as the others there. And price-wise, it's living off its past reputation. We saw the Venezuelan football team eating there when we went a few weeks ago. But it's not as good as the others. It's still very good food, but service not so much, and there are better options.
Okay. What else are we going to do in Asunción before we head out to other locales?
So I would say you've got to check out a football game while you're there. Paraguayans are very passionate about football. Sorry, you guys call it soccer.
That's okay. And we understand what you meant.
It's a very big deal here. They're very passionate about their teams, in particular the national team. So Paraguay got to the World Cup quarterfinals in 2010, their best ever performance in a World Cup. And they played Spain, who this is right in the middle of Spain's dominant era, where they won 3 major trophies in a row. But Paraguay did very well. They missed a penalty, which would have given them a chance to take the lead in the second half. That was disappointing for them, but Spain also missed a penalty. And then it took until the last 8 minutes for Spain to finally take the lead and win the game 1-0. But for Paraguay, this was a sign of devastation. They come so close to being within touching distance, potentially of the semi-final, or at least taking the game to extra time and potential penalties. So to lose it in the circumstances they did, having expected so little yet come so close to holding Spain to a draw, it was devastating for the locals.
The thing I find strange in that story, or funny in that story, is you hadn't been to Paraguay yet, and you didn't have a Paraguayan girlfriend yet, but we're talking about, in some detail, a game that happened 14 years ago. Would I be wrong to guess that you've heard about it multiple times since you've been in the country?
Yeah, that's right. To be honest, before I first came here a couple of years ago, I wouldn't have been able to recall that game from my memory. But it is something that's a key part of Paraguay's history here in the sporting world.
That's funny.
They were devastated about it. But on the flip side, a few days ago, they played Argentina in a World Cup qualifier. Argentina, world champions, very good team, top of the qualifying group for now, and they've been fairly dominant so far. But Paraguay won the game 2-1, and completely opposite. Everyone was really excited. My girlfriend said her dad was really happy about that one, and she was around her friend's house at the time, and she thought her friend had gone missing because her friend went out to get some food for them. But what actually happened was her friend got caught up in a massive group of football fans who were out on the streets celebrating the win against Argentina. So it took her a lot longer to get home because there were just so many people out celebrating. Although I did hear some noises where I am right now, and I went out to investigate, but it wasn't quite the same around here. But
Konnichiwa, I'm Yuki, a tour leader with Explore. Who knew that hidden among Tokyo's towering skyscrapers was a peaceful tea house surrounded by ancient trees and serene ponds? Actually, I knew it was my mother's secret sanctuary. Not everyone knows about Tokyo's Hamarikyu Gardens. ありがとうございます. But you will if you explore. Search exploreworldwide.com and don't just travel, explore.
We're so done with New Year, New You. This year, it's more you on Bumble. More of you shamelessly sending playlists, especially that one filled with show tunes. More of you finding Geminis because you know you always like them. More of you dating with intention because you know what you want. And you know what? We love that for you. Someone else will too. Be more you this year and find them on Bumble.
Yeah, it's still a very big deal. International football, they care about their club football as well in Paraguay. And you can go to a game in Asunción. You've got lots of teams here. You've got Cerro Porteño and Nacional. They're next door to each other. So you can go there for an authentic Latin American, or I should say, South American football experience. I've been to games in most Central and South American countries. And it's different from Central America, where you have a big ground and a very small crowd. South America, they are noisy in Central America, but South America, they generally pack the grounds. I haven't always seen that. That's not been the case in every country I've been to. I don't remember a full ground in Ecuador or Peru, but certainly here when I went to a Nacional game, the crowds were absolutely packed with football fans cheering their teams on. And occasionally you can even see some famous players who you may know from Europe. I saw Roque Santa Cruz, ex-Bayern Munich and Manchester City. He was playing. Oscar Cardoso, who played for Benfica, but is best known for missing a penalty in the 2010 World Cup against Spain. He was also playing that day. But yeah, every so often, you've got Juan Iturbe. I think he plays for, I want to say Cerro Porteño at the moment. He'll be known to people who play FIFA because he was a good, talented youngster on there a few years ago, although I don't think his career quite took off in the way it was expected. But he did play for Porto, Roma, and very briefly he was at Bournemouth, who are in the Premier League. So there's another.
I'm going to move us on from soccer or from football, as I cannot keep up with you in a football conversation. Anything else we want to do in Asunción before we move out?
So if you want to go shopping, you've got two options, really. Well, you've got several options, but you've got two extremes. So you can go to Paseo La Galeria, which is a very upmarket shopping mall. And that's very much what you're used to in the US or Western Europe. All your big brand stores, expensive prices outside of the food court, which is still relatively affordable. So that's your westernized shopping experience. But if you want a more local shopping experience, you should go to Mercado Cuatro or Market 4, which is a very local experience. It's a big, sprawling marketplace, and it sells everything: electronics, fruits, foods, animals. There's even gambling machines there if that's your kind of thing. You can get very cheap goods here, and it's not somewhere where tourists really go. It's very much a local experience. There is a little bit of I wouldn't go as far as saying it's dangerous, but I would say it's somewhere where there is a risk of pickpocketing, and you should keep an eye on your phone and your valuables there. But if you want to see how Paraguayans live in day-to-day life, that's probably the best example of where to go see it. And then other than that, you just get generic shopping areas all throughout the city, which are more of the middle ground.
I love a good market. What is the most unusual thing you have seen at Market 4?
They did have a lot of chickens just running around there, so you can just buy a live chicken, which, I don't recall being able to do that at any markets back home in the UK. But that was interesting to see that there was a guy trying to sell us chickens when we were there a few weeks back. They do keep them in cages, so I don't think it's the best conditions for them. But it's still a very interesting cultural experience and quite different to what in the West.
And I'm assuming this, like other Latin American markets, also has places to eat inside the market?
It's very much a local budget sort of area. So
Yeah.
if you want something to eat, there aren't really so many restaurants, but you might find a place selling street food such as
Okay.
empanadas, which are popular pastries filled with meat, chicken, ham and cheese, or various other fillings.
Excellent.
So you've also got Negroni in Asunción, which is a very upmarket bar, sky bar, with great views across the Paraguay River where you can look into Argentina. So this is most of the attractions in Asunción within 5 to 10 minutes walking distance of each other. So the Cultural Centre, the Independence House, the President's Palace, the Pantheon of Heroes, Negroni Sky Bar, they're all within around a 10-minute radius of each other. So it's really easy to get between them. This is in downtown Asunción.
Okay.
But Negroni, you can go there, you can have a few drinks, and you can look over the river and see the sunset. So it's a very nice place for it, more of an upmarket feel, and definitely one that I recommend.
And one where I don't have to necessarily order a Negroni cocktail.
Nope, there are other options there. So there's all sorts of beers, there's loads of other cocktails, probably soft drinks too, although I've never actually ordered them myself, so I'm not certain on that, but you'd imagine so in a standard bar. But it is a nice place to go and chill for a bit, and definitely something I'd recommend checking out in the evening.
Okay, excellent. Anything else in Asunción?
I think I've mostly covered the main things in Asunción there. There are a few smaller things. You've got a zoo there. It's an okay zoo. To be honest, you've probably seen better in your home country. So if you've got kids, great place to go. There's also a small natural history museum there. But I would say that I've covered the most important things already.
Okay. Where to next?
Two of the best day trips from Asunción, just over an hour away. You've got Aregua and San Bernardino. Now, Aregua is a city, in fact, both of them are on the banks of Lake Ipacaraí. Aregua is on the west side and San Bernardino on the east. But Aregua is famous for two things. It's famous for ceramics, so locals would generally go there to buy pottery or just a statue of something they think looks nice in their garden, or something to drink water out of. But also strawberries. And every winter in Paraguay, which is June to August, you've got a strawberry expo that takes place in Aregua for about 2 months during the strawberry harvest season. That's generally around mid-July to mid-September. And the expo is where they have a series of market stalls all over Aregua, and they sell anything strawberry related. So you can get strawberry pie, strawberry liquor, strawberries, of course, strawberry cream, strawberry desserts, strawberry alfajors, anything strawberry related.
What was the last one? Strawberry?
Alfajors. So they're a popular pastry. It's generally filled with dulce de leche, which is a popular, similar to caramel. It's a filling that they put in the middle, but you get strawberry flavoured ones at the expo. Although, yeah, that's more unusual and unique to Aregua, because normally alfajores, they're a plain pastry with dulce de leche. Sometimes they're covered with chocolate. So to get strawberry ones, Aregua is the place to be in the wintertime.
Okay. And speaking of wintertime, what kind of weather can I expect in Paraguay? My picture of Paraguay is that it's relatively flat, unlike so many of its neighbors.
Yeah, so we just came here actually from a couple of weeks in the Bolivian Altiplano, and then Atacama Desert in Chile, and Salta in Argentina, which are all in and around the Andes. So Paraguay, as soon as we came down, suddenly the temperature rose by about 15 degrees Celsius. Those other places are all at altitude, whereas Paraguay is very flat. And as a result, it's a very hot country. Even the winters, they're generally quite warm during the day. At nighttime, you may need to put a jacket on, but not much more than that. You'll never need your hat and gloves and scarf around here because you just don't get the weather you'll get in Northern Europe or in Canada, places like that.
I think I saw in the winter, during the day, I would see highs of roughly in the 60s or in Fahrenheit or in the teens in Celsius.
Yeah, so a winter in Paraguay is what in the US or in Europe we might call a more moderate, maybe beginning of autumn / late spring. So we'd consider it nicer weather and not particularly wintry weather. But yeah, winters are
And then,
moderate.
am I going to pay for that in the summer? What kind of summer temperatures am I looking at?
Yeah, the summers can get really hot here. Just like most hot countries, buildings generally have air conditioning, they have fans, but the
Mhm.
summers they can hit 40 degrees Celsius. I'm not
Okay,
sure.
that's 100 degrees Fahrenheit. That's warm. Okay.
Yeah, just
With
yesterday.
humidity, I'm guessing.
Oh, yeah, it's very humid here as well. Yesterday was 37 degrees, and then in the
Oh,
evening
wow.
you
And
had,
it's spring because we're recording this in November.
yeah, so mid November, and it's still very hot here now. We haven't
Okay.
even got into the heat of summer yet, but still, we can have some very hot days like that. Rain is rarer, but being a tropical country, when it rains, it generally comes with thunderstorms and a lot of
Okay.
humidity, and it's generally quite heavy rain, but for short bursts. So it'll be really heavy
Got
for
it.
half an hour and then it will stop. But we had a thunderstorm last night, which isn't the norm here, but it has made the temperature drop quite a bit today, and it still feels very humid outside. That's Paraguayan weather for you. You won't find snow here. So if you want to go skiing, then Paraguay, I'm afraid that's not the place to come.
Well, and you mentioned in Aregua is the Strawberry Festival. Are there other festivals or holidays that we might want to plan a trip around to go to Paraguay?
So Paraguay does have a few holidays every year. It's a religious country. They're Catholics here. So
Hmm.
any important holiday in Christianity is also a big deal here.
Okay.
Christmas is obviously an important time. Easter is massive. In the UK, Easter is less about religion these days and more about chocolate eggs.
Right.
But in Latin America and Paraguay, it's very big on religion. They have a whole week dedicated to Easter. They call it Semana Santa.
Right. Holy
And
Week.
yeah, there's all sorts of processions during Holy Week. I think one of the most popular places to go to see how people mark their religion, which is about an hour and a half to 2 hours from Ascension. They celebrate the Virgin Mary here as well, that they believe that she's done some great things. So you might see people engage in long processions to walk to churches, that they'll be dressed in religious gear. It's not uncommon to see nuns in the streets here. You might not see them every day, but they are around dressed in their religious clothing.
Okay.
I would say religion is more of a thing amongst the older generations here. If you meet Paraguayans in their 70s, 80s, 90s, then there's a good chance that they've had a very strict Catholic upbringing, and that's a big part of their lives. Whereas if you meet Paraguayans in their teens, 20s, and 30s, religion is not such a big deal. And today, there's probably only around 10% of the population that are really strict churchgoers. But you can still feel the influence of religion in Paraguay. And if you come on some of these days, that where like Virgin of Cacupe Day, which is the 8th
Hmm.
of December, or Christmas Day, or in Holy Week, that's when you really will see a lot of the Catholic displays going on.
Okay.
But I'd also say that there's other important holidays here. So 15th of August was the founding of Ascension. And we were in San Bernardino that day. And they had a big event going on by the lake. So You had lots of Paraguayan dance performances there. They were doing traditional local dances, which you wouldn't see elsewhere. Very different to neighboring countries like Bolivia or Argentina or Brazil. And they do all sorts of different dances. I'm not a dance expert at all, but there was one where they put pots on their heads, so they were balancing pottery on their head whilst dancing, which is pretty talented if you ask me, but quite an interesting thing to see. And they also had markets selling local crafts, a good place to get souvenirs, but also foods as well. Asado, which is barbecue, steak. Yeah, there are a few good holidays here, which are worth
And
coming to
San
Paraguay to
Bernardino,
see.
you say, but you didn't say where San Bernardino is.
San Bernardino is a big beach resort, not big, but very popular amongst the rich and famous from Asunción.
Okay.
And it's on the east side of Lake Yapacaray, so it takes about an hour and a half to get the bus down from Asunción. And it's where rich people will generally spend their summer holidays. They'll go to the beach, they'll rent an Airbnb or an apartment, and they'll invite all their friends round. They might have barbecues, they might play some sports, because San Bernardino has some great sports facilities. It was a town that was founded by German and Swiss immigrants, but you don't really have that much influence from them anymore. There is a bakery which we really like there called La Alemania, obviously Germany.
Okay.
But it felt much more Paraguayan than German. You get some really nice bollos here, which are a popular bun filled with dulce de leche, and they tasted a lot better there than the ones here in Asunción. I would recommend checking that out. But if you're looking for more of a German, Swiss, Alpine feel, then there's more places like that in other countries like Argentina and Brazil.
Okay. I see that there are some breweries in San Bernardino, so that would also go back to the German influence.
Yeah, the Germans do love their beer, and I think they spread a little bit of that culture around here over the years.
And you mentioned the lake, so we've been to two places on either side of the lake. Is this a lake we're going to be swimming in or boating on, or what kind of things should I expect there?
It's definitely not one for swimming.
Okay.
Unfortunately, with Paraguay, a lot of the major bodies of water here are heavily polluted, and that includes Lake Yapacaray. So you wouldn't go in there to swim because it can be quite harmful to do so, and the locals recommend it as well. A good travel tip is to always follow what the locals do, because they'll know better than anyone else on these things. But what you can do is you can take a boat ride around the lake. If you just walk along the beach, you'll see boats coming over to the shore, and a guy will generally try and wave you down, trying to get some business. And I think it's around $20 roughly for half an hour to an hour. I think half an hour is accurate if I remember rightly. You can go around, see the sights on the lake, see the shores, see the beaches from the water, and that can be a nice activity to do. So yeah, that's how you'd enjoy the lakes in Paraguay.
Okay, excellent.
Hey there, Ryan Reynolds here. It's a new year, and you know what that means. No, not the diet. Resolutions. A way for us all to try and do a little bit better than we did last year. And my resolution, unlike big wireless, is to not be a raging and raise the price of wireless on you every chance I get. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes on unlimited. See mintmobile.com for details.
This episode is brought to you by Amazon. Sometimes the most painful part of getting sick is the getting better part. Waiting on hold for an appointment, sitting in crowded waiting rooms, standing in line at the pharmacy. That's painful. Amazon One Medical and Amazon Pharmacy remove those painful parts of getting better with things like 24/7 virtual visits and prescriptions delivered to your door. Thanks to Amazon Pharmacy and Amazon One Medical, healthcare just got less painful.
Where to next?
So if you go a little bit further out, actually quite a lot further out, you have Encarnacion, which is a city on the southern border with Argentina, and it's called Posadas on the Argentinian side. Now, Encarnacion itself, the city isn't that great, although the beach is one of the better beaches to go to in the summer. So I wouldn't recommend Encarnacion if you come during wintertime, June, July, August, for the city itself.
Okay.
But what it is good for is it's a good base for the Jesuit missions, which Paraguay only has one UNESCO World Heritage Site, and that's the Jesuit missions of Jesus de Tavarangue and Santissima Trinidad de Parana. You can get to those two that I think was about a 50 minute bus ride from Encarnacion. And the two ruins themselves, they're about 10 kilometers apart. So generally what you do is get a taxi between the two. It costs around $3 to get the bus to get there. And the entry price, you get a ticket for $5, 40,000 guaranis, and this covers both of these ruins, but also the ruins of San Cosme y Damian, which are not part of the UNESCO World Heritage Site. That's only the two that I just mentioned, Jesus de Tavarangue and Santissima Trinidad de Parana. But you go into these places and there's a guide who will walk you around for free, and they'll explain about how the Guarani people lived here and then how the Jesuits came along from Spain. They came with the intention of spreading religion, but they worked alongside the local Guarani people. They spread their culture, ideas, technology. So the Guarani people were able to build small communities with the help of the Jesuits. And you can visit the ruins and the guide will explain this. Although one thing I will say is that Paraguay is a country without many English speakers and not many English-speaking tourists. So you may have to brush up on your Spanish if you want to understand everything that's going on. But the guide is included and the ticket includes all three ruin sites. San Cosme y Damian, that was about a 2-hour bus ride from Encarnacion in the opposite direction. So if you want to do that one, you should do it on a separate day to the other two. Santissima Trinidad de Parana and Jesus de Tavarangue, easily do those together. You don't even need a whole day, just an afternoon is enough. San Cosme y Damian, that needs a separate day on its own. But the one thing to be aware of is that if you go during the week, then the bus back is a school bus at 4:00, and that's the only bus out of there. And this is a really small town, so just be aware of that because you don't want to get stranded. I don't think they even had hotels there. They didn't really have much at all outside of the ruins. But I would say that these ruins were more interesting than the other two because there are two parts to San Cosme y Damian. So the second part is the ruins, which is similar to the other two. But the first part, they had an observatory, and it was quite an important location for astronomy in South America. They've got some major telescopes there. So if you visit today, your guide will take you around the observatory and explain the history of the astronomy. It can be a little bit tricky again if you don't speak fluent Spanish. You might not understand everything there, but it does add something a little bit different. If you've been to a major astronomy site before, Atacama Desert, for example, then it's not quite on the same level as that. But in Paraguay, it is quite an interesting spot. So all I'd say is just make sure you don't miss that 4 p.m. bus. Otherwise, it could be a long night.
Okay.
And taxis aren't always reliable. There aren't too many of them. Uber costs about £20, so $25 to get back to Encarnacion, which isn't too much, but I don't think it actually works there. I didn't try it, but sometimes it tells me it's available when it isn't really. So it gave me a price, but whether it works, I'm not convinced it will. So just make sure you get the bus.
Okay. Anything else that you would put on our itinerary here for Paraguay?
If you can get to the Chaco region, then that's a really interesting place to see. But there's two major things in the Chaco, really. One is the wildlife. It's a really vast region. You don't get too many people living there. It's not like the cities. Most of Paraguay's population, they live in Asunción, Encarnación, Ciudad del Este, the other cities. Very few in the Chaco. You get really nice nature there. Chances are, if you go to the Chaco, then you'll be in a remote place. You'll be on your own, no other tourists around. You'll be able to see the wildlife roaming around. There's cows, there's sheep, there's horses, but there's also more exotic wildlife. So tapirs live there, crocodiles. My girlfriend's uncle had a very close encounter once with a jaguar. So jaguars are very rare. Chances are you won't see them. Even many locals who live near jaguars may not see them much in their lifetime. So I wouldn't be too scared of jaguars, because you'll be, I'd say, very fortunate to meet one, because it'll be a really interesting thing to see. But yeah, you could also say unfortunate. Aside from the wildlife though, the Chaco is also home to lots of indigenous groups. What we did was we saw a group of people called the Toba people. And unlike most Paraguayans who speak either Spanish or the main indigenous language, Guarani, the Toba people spoke another language called Toba Quam, but they live a very simple life in the villages, very traditional. So the women will generally grow vegetables and do jobs around the village, whereas the men will go out hunting for meat. And they also have their own take on religion there. The Spanish influence did get to them eventually, and they follow Christianity now. But interestingly, the village place I went to, you've got a statue of an indigenous Jesus there. So it's a little bit different from your standard take on Christianity. But yeah, it's very interesting to see really authentic culture. It is a tricky region to get to because you can't really get there on public transport. So you'd either have to find a local Paraguayan to take you or rent a car yourself. And even then, you've got the language barrier. But for the Toba people, you should offer a gift if you go to visit. So that's quite an interesting thing to do. But to summarize, the Chaco, great nature, fantastic wildlife, and interesting indigenous groups live in there. It's a hard region to get to, but a really interesting one if you do get the chance to go out there.
Now, you don't speak that language, and I'm gathering you went independently. You rent a car or took a car?
So my girlfriend's parents drove us out there. There was a bit of a crossover because the locals, they speak Toba Quam. My girlfriend's mum speaks Guarani, and they spoke a little bit of Guarani. So there was just about enough for some conversation there, but they generally don't speak Spanish.
Interesting. Okay. Anything else we want to include in this itinerary, or should we start to get to some of our wrap-up questions?
I would say the last place that you should really consider is Ciudad del Este. So City of the East. It's on the eastern border, the triple frontier border with Argentina and Brazil. Now, Ciudad del Este, the city itself, is best known as a cheap shopping destination where you get lots of Brazilians and Argentinians crossing for cheap goods every day. But it's just outside of the city where you have the two attractions that are really worth seeing for tourists. So to the south, you've got the Saltos del Monte waterfalls. Now, a lot of people say if you've been to Iguazu Falls, which are just less than an hour across the border on both the Brazilian and Argentinian side, Saltos del Monte Falls, they're not so impressive. And it is true that they're not quite as good as Iguazu, but I've been to Iguazu twice, both sides, Brazilian and Argentinian twice. And then I went to Saltos del Monte after seeing that. And I still find those waterfalls were pretty cool to see. Unlike Iguazu, the Saltos del Monte waterfalls, we were the only tourists there. Iguazu is absolutely full of tourists. Yes, the waterfalls are smaller than Iguazu, but if you want an authentic experience and the whole place to yourself, then Saltos del Monte, I highly recommend that. And the other thing in Ciudad del Este, you've got the Itaipu Dam just to the north, which they share along the Parana River with Brazil. And this is a really big engineering feat, really impressive for people who are into that kind of thing. And you can take a tour of the dam. If you take a tour from Brazil, you've got to pay for it. I'm not sure what the price is. But in Paraguay, the tours are free. So if you go to the Paraguay side, you can take a tour of the dam, don't have to pay anything. Again, the language is all Spanish. Now, if you want to book the tour, you will need to email cturistico@itaipu.gov.py and then wait for them to confirm your spot. It's not such an easy thing to find online, especially if you don't speak Spanish. So just try and remember that email address. Turistico, Turistico. But yeah, those are the two main attractions really for Ciudad del Este, the waterfalls and the dam. And yes, it's a cheap shopping place. For tourists, that's not really something of interest. There's a lot going on there. But if you've been to Mercado Cuatro, then the shopping scene in Ciudad del Este is similar, I guess, just on a bigger scale. And then the other thing that people do there really is just cross the border to Foz do Iguazu in Brazil or Puerto Iguazu in Argentina to see the falls or continue their trip from there.
Excellent. As we go to wrap this up, anything else we need to know before we go to Paraguay?
So I would say that it is a more tricky country to visit if you don't speak Spanish.
Right.
Because English is not widely spoken. It doesn't have such a big tourist setup like Bolivia, Argentina, Brazil. Really easy to find tours, find accommodation in those places. In Paraguay, it's not too hard to find accommodation, but you're generally paying a bit more than you would for quality that's not quite as good in some ways. We stayed in a 3-star hotel in Asunción, which was a bit run down, small breakfast. It was okay, but you'd get more for your money in a more built-up tourist hotspot like Uyuni in Bolivia, like Mendoza in Argentina. Just be prepared for that. If you are prepared to spend more money, which coming from the US idea of cheap is not the Paraguayan
it's a little different,
idea of cheap. So Paraguayan expensive is still US cheap. So you can, I say, splash out and you can still get a decent accommodation. Airbnb is also really popular here. But yeah, don't expect it to be as cheap as Cusco, Uyuni and other proper tourist hotspots in South America. Overall though, Paraguay is still very cheap. As I say, accommodation slightly above standard rates for other places in the region. Food, very affordable. Rental cars cost around $30 to $60 a day, I think. Tours can be a bit harder to find because it's not a touristy country. So if you're looking for tours, then you might have a bit more difficulty doing that. It's more of a independent travel, going to the bus station and booking tickets in person if you want to get to other places.
Got it. As we go to wrap this up, you're standing in the prettiest spot in Paraguay. Where are you standing and what are you looking at?
Ooh, I would say probably the Saltos del Monte waterfalls. They're definitely up there. Or the Chaco. In fact, Chaco would be number one. You're standing there. You can see small ponds of water, palm trees, lots of greenery, livestock walking past, the horses, the sheep, the goats. And generally they're just roaming free and wild because the Chaco is such a vast region. Not many people there other than the indigenous groups. If you see sheep in the UK, it would be on a farm controlled by a farmer. In Paraguay, they're a lot more wild. So the Chaco would be my number one beauty spot here.
Excellent. One thing that makes you laugh and say only in Paraguay.
Ooh, good question. Yeah, there are things that are different, but I can't think of any that particularly make me laugh.
Okay.
One thing that is quite different with the culture here, they drink something called terere. If you're familiar with mate, it's
Yeah.
like a herbal equivalent of tea, which is really popular in Argentina.
Right.
In Paraguay, they prefer terere, which is a cold version of mate, basically. And they'll drink it out a giant flask, and you'll see the locals carrying these big flasks everywhere they go. Quite often, if you get in a car with Paraguay, and they'll have a big flask of terere in there, and they have these small gourds which they drink out of. They'll put the herb in the gourd, and then they'll pour the terere in there. What they'll generally do is they'll pass it around from person to person.
Yeah.
So you just take a couple of sips and then give it to the next person, and they'll pour some more in, and they'll take a couple of sips, and you'll pass it around in a circle like that. So that's a little bit different from what we do in the West.
Yeah, just a little bit. So very similar to the mate culture, it sounds like, except cold.
Yeah, it's interesting that as soon as you cross the border from Argentina, it goes from hot to cold.
Huh, funny. And if you had to summarize Paraguay in just 3 words, what 3 words would you use?
Authentic, enjoyable, affordable. It's somewhere where you can connect with the local culture. It's very affordable compared to Western countries, and it's good fun. I think Paraguay is a really underrated country. Yeah, sure, there's no Machu Picchu, there's no Iguazu Falls here or any of these major bucket list destinations, but that doesn't mean it's not worth visiting. I think it absolutely is. So I'd highly recommend going to Paraguay if you get the chance.
Excellent. Our guest again has been Alex from adventuretoeverycountry.com. And Alex, if we wanted to send people to your best post on Paraguay, where are we going to send them?
Oh, I do have a 7-day Paraguay itinerary.
Okay.
I'd also say if you want to know more about Asunción, then I've got the 19 best things to do in Asunción, which I may expand one day. And if you want to know more about the steakhouses, I've written one on the best restaurants in Asunción as well, but also some more logistical things. Is Paraguay safe? And the short answer is yes. The long answer, you can read about that.
You have to read the post for that.
Yeah.
Excellent. We'll put some links to your website so that people can find those. Alex, thanks so much for coming on Amateur Traveler and sharing with us your love for Paraguay. And special thanks to Alex here because we had a technical issue that we would describe as the problem was between the chair and the keyboard. Meaning I screwed something up, and so we had to do some of this again. So thank you for your patience as well.
Thanks for having me, Chris. It's been a pleasure.
This show will be the first show of 2025, but I'm recording it here at the end of 2024. A special thanks here as we close up the year to the patrons of the show who help support Amateur Traveler financially. This became my day job in 2024, and I appreciate their support in that. If you're interested in learning how you can become a patron of the show, go to patreon.com/amateurtraveler. We will start voting on where to go for the 2026 trip for Amateur Traveler. Remember, 2025 is Cuba. And do remember that the patrons get their first shot at those trips. I've got a little travel myself coming up here in January. I'll be going down to Florida to be inducted into the Podcasting Hall of Fame. Still can't imagine why that is happening, but it's pretty cool. Probably hitting some theme parks while I'm down there, and then I'll be heading up to the International Media Marketplace in New York City at the end of January. If you're in either city, drop me an email. Maybe we can get together for coffee. I got a comment from AVC 4x4 on the episode we did on Ushuaia that the End of the World Post Office was permanently closed as of mid-December 2024. So just closed right after that episode came out. And thanks for that correction. Good to know that that has changed. New on the Amateur Traveler website since the last episode is the Ultimate Aruba Vacation Guide, a perfect 4-day itinerary for your Caribbean vacation. So check that out, as well as the other blog posts over at the website, amateurtraveler.com. And with that, we're going to end this episode of Amateur Traveler. If you have any questions, send an email to chris2x@gmail.com, or better yet, leave a comment on this episode at amateurtraveler.com. And thanks so much for listening.